a collection of Stuart engines and some other nice things. This is part 10, examining some of the parts of the Stuart Twin Victoria and finding one very obvious serious problem. Fitting some new piston rings and preparing to make the new crankshaft. This is a pair of steam grade silicone O-rings. I buy these from Blackgates Engineering and I've fitted one of them to one of the pistons. In case you're wondering what that black line is on my thumb, that is the cut caused by the screwdriver blade ploughing through my thumb when I was trying to get the old piston rings out. One has to suffer for one's art, unfortunately. Well, sometimes anyway. So far, I've only fitted a piston ring to one of the pistons. If you've watched the previous episode, you may have noticed that the original piston ring appeared to be too big for the cylinder. The question is it because of the internal diameter of the piston groove, or was it due to using a type of oil with additives that caused the original piston ring to swell and increase in size? I'm lubricating this ring using Hallett Oil's compounded bearing oil, because initially I'm going to run this engine using compressed air, so steam oil is not really necessary. On this piston at least, with the new silicone O-ring, it is a perfect fit in the cylinder. I knew this as soon as I fitted it. It was very easy to fit. Here I'm moving the piston back and forth in the cylinder, and it really is moving smoothly. I think this engine will run very well by the time I've rebuilt the parts that need rebuilding. In this clip I'm moving the pistons back and forth just by holding the piston rod, and I couldn't do this with the previous piston rings fitted. This part of the job has been successful. I'm not going to fit the cylinder covers at this stage because I need to hold the piston while I screw a lock nut onto the end of the piston rod and in turn screw the piston rod into the crosshead. I'm not ready to do that yet though. There is a serious problem with this part of the engine. These are the pair of crank webs that are removed from the original crankshaft. Look at the image, you can really see what the problem is. More about this later. This engine was bought from Stuart Models as a pre-machined kit, and from there on it went downhill once the owner started to assemble it. And when the parts didn't fit, he filed and machined bits of them away. To be fair, machined parts sometimes need a little bit of help. This should be a tight fit, not a sloppy fit. Unfortunately, if part A does not fit into part B and is an interference fit, you have to ease one or both of the parts. I'll come back to these crank webs shortly. What I'm doing here is refitting both of the main bearings onto the beds of the engine. And I really do not know why Stuart still use these gigantic 2BA bolts. When I start to reassemble this engine for real, when I've made various parts for it, I'm going to use one size smaller 2BA bolts. That only means that the head is smaller, not the thread. And as usual, I buy these one size smaller BA bolts from Blackgates Engineering. The reason for fitting the bearings at this stage is to check how the crankshaft fits, and the crankshaft currently is a very long piece of silver steel, accurately ground, and it's quite a tight fit. But it's much better than this one. Here's the old crankshaft. This won't even go through the bearings, because the grub screws in the flywheel have chewed it up. I don't have to grind off this damaged part. I just need to use this crankshaft as a template to see how long the new one needs to be, because this one is too short. And in this case, I've just sat the old crankshaft on top of the bearings and I can clearly see that it's too short. Having a wild guess what's caused this, I would think that the actual two engines are spaced too far apart. As if by magic, a third crank web appeared, the one in the middle. This is one that I made as part of the series How to Build a Model Steam Engine, and yes, I will finish it one day. Here's the crank web for the single Stuart Victoria that I made, fitted onto the crankshaft that I made for the same engine. This is a good fit with no shake whatsoever. Quite unlike the one that's been machined too short that's sat on the bench. Not only is it too short, the hole in the middle is tapered. The other two crank webs match quite well. Maybe I could file a bit of the support away in the centre, but I think it'll be okay. Here's a comparison. The crankshaft that I made is 1/2 inch in diameter. I'll take that out of the picture. Thankfully, the hole in the crank web that I also made is exactly as per the drawing. I was going to use the crank web that's the wrong size on my crankshaft. I may still do this, but really I should buy another casting and remachine one. In this clip, I'm showing you the piece of bar that I'm going to use to make the new crankshaft for the Twin Victoria. It's precision ground silver steel. You can actually harden and temper this stuff, but it wears very well just as it is. I've added the 2 crank webs that I'm going to use into the image. On the left is the one that I made, and on the right is the one from the Stuart kit. All I need to do now is make a crankshaft. This is the original crankshaft in the chuck of my Myford lathe. The end of it was damaged as I removed it from the flywheel. Because of the damage to this crankshaft from the flywheel's grub screws, I couldn't slide it out of the flywheel, so I used a hammer to tap it out of the flywheel. This damaged one end of the original crankshaft slightly, and as you've just seen, I removed the burr on the end of the crankshaft using some emery cloth. I did this to show just how short the crankshaft is relative to the crank web. And the more I look at the state and tolerances of this crankshaft, I really do not think it was machined by Stuart models. Here is the crank web that wobbled about on the original crankshaft. And I think I know why. It's been reamed out using a hand reamer. The problem is with hand reamers, they're actually tapered, usually only the first inch or so, but if you don't run the hand reamer all the way through, you do end up with a tapered hole. Here, using a needle file, I'm marking the piece of silver steel so I know where to cut it. As it's very hard stuff, I cut it on my bandsaw, and now here it is in the Myford lathe, ready for the machining operation. And I'll be showing that in detail in the next episode. That's it for now. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.